Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is an interesting character. So he's a Democratic governor of the red state of Kentucky. He defeated Matt Bevin in 2019, Matt Bevin being the incumbent, and then he won re-election in 2023. And he focused a lot on the issue of education in his original campaign, attacking Matt Bevin for being terrible for teachers and going after some of those policies that teachers and unions did not like. But at the same time, he's not some staunchly leftist guy. He's not a fire-breathing progressive and not a socialist. I think this will make him a really interesting guy to keep an eye on as a presidential candidate, in the sense that he sort of has progressive instincts, but is not super hard left. I would not say he's as left-wing as, say, Tim Walz or Bernie Sanders. But some recent presidential candidate tier lists for the Democrats in 2028 have ranked him fairly highly. Yes, people are already starting to make those. Can you believe it? So see, I'm just going with the flow here. But I saw one where they ranked him in A tier, just below S, and pointed out how, yeah, look, this is a guy who won election in a red state, and that earns him sort of a presumption of being a great candidate. Now, Chris Christie obviously he's the other way around. He's the Republican governor of a blue state, and indeed in 2012, people thought that he would be a good candidate against Obama. So there's something to that. And there's also a rich history of Democrats who are from southern states doing well in presidential elections. So consider Bill Clinton of Arkansas. Arkansas is now deep red. It used to be a little bit more of a toss-up back then, but he's a guy, he won re-election. He was winning the state. He did really well. Lyndon B. Johnson, Texas, Jimmy Carter, Georgia, and he won Georgia both times big, even in his landslide loss against Ronald Reagan. So obviously, once we get a little more recent, we have Obama and Biden, who are Illinois and Delaware respectively. So they're not Southern Democrats. But we have a rich history of these Southern Democrats doing very well. It's like they win over kind of both prongs of the American electorate, the conservative coded prong of the South and the liberal coded prong of the Northeastern electorate. It's really interesting. And obviously there's a lot more nuance to that. I kind of just dumbed it down, kind of oversimplified and made it a little too black and white, or red and blue, if you will. But there's something to that. So this is a guy, yeah, as I said, not as left-leaning as Tim Walz, but certainly a little bit more on the left flank of the Democratic Party moving past the 2024 election. We look at someone like Roy Cooper, Josh Shapiro. Those guys are a bit more to the right than Beshear, I would argue. Gretchen Whitmer, similarly, fairly moderate-ish Democrats, not like conservative Joe Manchins, but also, not super progressive. Beshear's in favor of expanding Medicaid, which is one of those things that's like, okay, that sets him apart from the more staunchly progressive candidates. People like, Tim Walz is expected to run in 2028. I don't know for sure, but he talked about how we can't just talk about tinkering around the edges of Medicare and Medicaid. We have to talk about doing universal health care, and the American people want to see someone run on that. And so it seems like Beshear would not be that guy unless he had a change of mind and decided to go in that direction. And who knows, if the winds are really blowing strongly in that direction within the Democratic Party these next 4 years, maybe he will do that. It's entirely possible. Maybe there will be such strong backlash against Trump and his deregulatory agenda, his agenda that takes away health care from people, that mainstream Democrats are like, you know what? We finally have to fold. We have to say we support universal health care, because there are a lot of money interests that would be against something like that. Big pharma, a lot of lobbyists who tell them, no, don't support universal health care, just support something like a public option, support expanding Medicaid, COBRA stuff, the Affordable Care Act. So who knows? But I think this is a guy who has a bit of an appeal to the Southern types. Obviously, his approval rating is the best of any Democratic governor in the country, which is fascinating. So you've got these Democrats in really deep blue states. They've ostensibly got people who are predisposed towards loving them because they've got a bunch of Democratic voters. Think Gavin Newsom in California, very populous state, very blue state, except for places like Orange County. Think of J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. Think of Kathy Hochul in New York. They're these blue states. They should be beloved by their people. Think of the governor of Hawaii, too. Deep blue state. I've been there. It's blue. It's blue as hell. So none of these people have approval ratings higher than Beshear's. And it's like, what could be the cause of that? I mean, he's in a deeply Republican state. How on earth does something like this happen? I don't know. Maybe we're too cynical when we say that the American electorate is incapable of putting politics aside. Maybe. The most recent election, obviously, a lot of people, might have put politics aside and just said, okay, prices are high, so I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. They might not like Trump, they might not like Republicans, they might not hate Democrats, but they saw that prices were high, and so they said, okay, well, I guess we got to punish the incumbent party for that. And although Kamala Harris is not the incumbent president, she is the incumbent party, she's the vice president, so we have to vote against her. So going into 2028, we would likely see J.D. Vance as a nominee, and I think Beshear would be a good guy to take him on. They're pretty close in age, actually. Beshear probably like 6 or 7 years older than Vance. He's born in the late 70s. Vance, of course, born in 1984, millennial, 40 years old as of today. So that would be a really interesting matchup between those two because they've already sniped at each other a little bit. J.D. Vance accused Beshear of hoping that he gets raped at one point. I think that was, they were talking about abortion, and Vance kind of twisted what he said and said, oh, you want me to get raped? Because Beshear said, he thinks that getting raped is an inconvenience. Well, inconvenience is traffic. I hope you have to go through it, suggesting I hope you go through more than just an inconvenience. So Beshear stuck by his guns and defended himself. So these are guys who do not get along. Vance has also sniped at Beshear for potentially being a product of nepotism, saying, oh, his dad was a governor of Kentucky. After graduating law school, just went straight into his dad's law firm. So there's some bad blood there, and there's some stuff that I think could be pretty entertaining in terms of the debates. Trump is entertaining, but it's from time to time it's kind of fun to see someone who's not Trump spar with another person. Think about these Republican debates in 2024, the primaries with Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis. Those were actually pretty entertaining, and none of those people were Trump. So I think Americans have forgot what it's like to see their candidates sparring when neither candidate is named Donald Trump, actually. Remember the Democratic primary in 2020? So yeah, a little bit of beef here and there kind of helps. But I think that Andy Beshear is one of those candidates. I think he'd do well. He's pro-choice, so he's not going to upset any of the base, the progressive base. He's pro-LGBT rights, so there's not going to be people saying, oh, he's a homophobe or something like that, which there was some of that in the 2020 Democratic primary, if I recall. There were people saying, oh, like Bernie Sanders isn't sufficiently pro-transgender rights, or oh, Biden supported the Defense of Marriage Act, which he actually did, believe it or not, earlier in his days, and he still won anyhow. So even if people think the candidate is homophobic or something like that, that definitely doesn't mean the candidate is gonna lose. But yeah, I think he'd do better than Gavin Newsom at this point. I think Gavin Newsom has dug himself into a deep, awkward ditch by bringing on Steve Bannon, Michael Savage, and Charlie Kirk back to back to back on his podcast, just schmoozing it up with them and allowing Charlie Kirk in particular to just land body blows against him, just getting humiliated. So whatever my differences are with some of the Democratic candidates, and there are plenty, there's plenty of clownishness within the party, let's face it. We got to put that aside, we got to move on, and we got to say, stop this whole Project 2025 deregulatory nonsense, this administrative state massacre, this nonsense that's going on with Doge, this blatant corruption with Elon Musk out in public, cutting programs that he doesn't like, just basically turning the government into his own pet project, just as he's doing with Europe, bolstering these far-right candidates, these anti-Semitic candidates. We need to stop that. So I can put aside pretty much any difference. The question is whether or not American voters can put aside those differences. And I think Beshear, to the extent that being woke is a problem, I don't think that he comes off as woke. I watch him, I saw him on Pod Save America lately. He does not come off as woke. He comes off as a guy, a generic, Democrat who's not a fan of Trump, Southern guy, has some economically populist instincts to him, has good name recognition in Kentucky, so that's yet again a positive. And he's kept a low profile, which is probably a good thing. Think about high-profile Democrats, Gavin Newsom, Kathy Hochul. Are they really well reputed? There are plenty of people in New York and California who can't stand those people who probably are Democrats, but yet in Kentucky they're riding with their governor. So just some interesting thoughts. What do you think about Andy Beshear's potential as a 2028 candidate? Do you think he would win? Do you think he'd win the primary, the general? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Please like, comment, or subscribe to this channel. This has been The Morris, the Merrier. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.